Chapter 13. Finding more information about the genocide had been easy. Actually, it was amazing just how much information was readily available. So much information, and none of us had known anything about it. What I was finding hard was locating information that didn't just involve numbers, facts, and figures. 800,000 people had been slaughtered. I knew the number, the statistic, but I didn't know about one individual person who made up those numbers. It was just one large, faceless, anonymous black mass. How could the human mind hope to comprehend what a number that big even meant? I needed to see a picture, look into somebody's eyes the way I had looked into Crystal's eyes in those pictures in the paper, the way I could still look into her eyes whenever I closed my eyes or called on her memory. I needed to do this to know something about somebody who had been killed in Rwanda. I didn't exactly understand why I needed to do this, but I did. Somehow I needed to not let them just be statistics. So here I was, back at my computer. I clicked from page to page, site to site. More of the same. Maps, facts, figures, numbers, political discussion. But no, I stopped. Staring back at me were the soft brown eyes of a boy. He could have been 10 or 12 or 14. I couldn't tell. He had a gentle smile and was dressed in a starched white shirt and tie, and there was something wrong with his arm. The sleeve was wrong. Was it just the angle of the picture, or was he hiding his arm behind him, or it was gone? It just wasn't there. His left arm was missing. Under his picture was a title, Witness to Gen. I hesitated for a second, then another. Was this what I was looking for? Now that I'd maybe found it, I wasn't sure I wanted to. I looked deep into his eyes. I knew I owed it to him. I owed it to myself to go further. I scrolled down the page as the text was revealed at the bottom. His face disappeared from the top of the screen. My name is Jacob. I lived in Kigali with my family, my mother and my father, my 3 brothers and 2 sisters. In the next house lived my mother's parents, and her sisters lived beside that, with all my cousins. It was April the 9th. It was April the 9th. I know that day because it was my birthday, and the next day I was going to turn 11. I was excited. I went to bed waiting for my birthday to come. I was so excited that I had trouble sleeping. My parents had trouble for a different reason. They were scared. I knew that. Scared of what we had heard. That people were hurting other people. Hutus harming Tutsis. My family is Tutsi. I was a little scared too, but not too much. My father and my uncles and my big cousins and my oldest brother were all around. Nobody could hurt me with them to protect me. In the night, I didn't know what time, I heard the sounds on the streets, screaming and yelling, but also it sounded like laughter and music, loud music. It sounded like a party, like somebody was celebrating. And then I heard louder screaming, sounding like it was coming from right inside my house. And before I could even think, the door of my room was thrown open and dark figures rushed into the room. I was grabbed by the arm and by the hair and dragged off my sleeping mat and pulled into the main room. The room was filled with people, dozens and dozens of strangers. They were yelling and screaming. Some had spears, others pieces of wood or pipe, and some had matches. My mother was there, and my father, and all my brothers and sisters. They were being held and struck. I couldn't believe it. It was a nightmare. We were all dragged into the street. I was punched and kicked as I was dragged along, my arm twisting and turning, my head aching, my stomach screaming out so much I thought I was going to be sick. Outside, the street was filled with even more people than I'd ever seen, and among these strangers I saw other members of my family, my grandmother, my cousins, my uncles and aunts, all being held and kicked and hit with sticks. And then I saw my grandfather lying on the ground, not moving, his clothes painted with blood. Then I felt something, like burning, searing pain in my arm, and I looked down, and my arm, the whole arm, from above the elbow, was gone. There was a man holding a machete in one hand, and the jagged remains of my arm in the other. I staggered backward and fell over, clasping the stump of my arm with my other hand, the blood flowing, screaming. I tried to call out for my mother or father when the air became filled with screams, and from the ground where I lay, I saw the man, still holding my arm, waving it in the faces of my parents. My father struggled to get free, and my mother cried out, but they started to hit them more and more. Blows with fists and kicks and sticks, and then my mother was struck with a machete and fell to the ground, blood gushing from the slash across her face. I tried to get up, but I was kicked, and then somebody stomped on me, and then somebody heavy, a body tumbled on top of me. I started to struggle to move, but I didn't have the strength, and somehow it felt safe to be underneath, protected. I heard screams. I knew the voices of my cousins and my sisters and my brothers crying out in pain. And along with those voices were other people cheering, laughing, and the sound of music kept on playing. I couldn't see. Pinned beneath the body, I closed my eyes. I knew that if I screamed or cried out for help, that nobody would come to save me. It would just draw attention. My only hope to not die was to have them think that I was already dead. I felt weaker and weaker, and then nothing. When I woke up, I was lying on a mat. There was a bright light. I looked around. I didn't know where I was, but I saw a couple of other people lying around on mats all around me. I tried to get up, push myself up, and then I saw my arm, what was left of my arm, and I slumped to the ground. That was when the nurse came. She told me I was in the hospital. I asked her about my family. She didn't want to say, but I kept asking and asking. Even before she answered, I knew. Finally, she told me. I was found on the street, trapped beneath a body. Everybody else, all of my family, all of my neighbors were dead. The street was silent. They thought I was dead too, but I wasn't. And I'm not. And I'm alive to tell my story. This is what happened to me. This is true. This is my story. I tried to scroll back up the page. My hand was shaking. I moved up until Jacob's picture was once again on the screen. I looked at him. I saw the sleeve nearly pinned to the white shirt, and then I looked deep into his eyes. Jacob wasn't a statistic, he was a person. I tried to get to sleep for a long time. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw Jacob's. I had wanted to know about a person. Now I knew, and I wished I didn't. I couldn't get his picture out of my mind. I couldn't get the story out of my mind. I looked at the dim outline of my door and thought about Jacob in his bed and those men, those evil devils bursting in through the room. My mouth was dry. I sat up, reached over, and took a sip from the glass of Coke that sat on my night table. Warm, flat, caffeine-filled liquid. That would really help me get to sleep. All it did was confirm that I need to go to the bathroom. I climbed out of bed and went to the bathroom. I flipped up the seat, and it clanked noisily against the back of the tank. As I stood there relieving myself, I heard a sound, music and voices from outside on the street. I stopped and looked out the window. It was a car, radio blaring, racing away. I watched as the taillights disappeared around the corner. Suddenly my whole body felt uneasy, anxious, like I was on pins and needles. I felt my breath catch in my throat. Something was wrong. I didn't know what, but something. Then I realized. The voices, the music outside my bedroom. That was what Jacob had heard outside his room before he was grabbed and dragged outside, before his arm was cut off, before his family was killed. I took a deep breath. Okay, this wasn't good, but at least I knew why I was feeling so anxious. But even though I knew, my heart wasn't slowing down and I wasn't feeling any better. Maybe a glass of milk would help. I walked out of the bathroom, through my bedroom, opened the door, and peered into the hall. It was silent and dark. The only light was a dim glow leaking up the stairs from the night light in the little bathroom down by the kitchen. Slowly on my bare feet, I moved along the hallway. My parents' bedroom door was slightly ajar. I started to pass by when I stopped. I listened at the door. Silence. Slowly I pushed the door, opened the door. It was dark, but I looked hard until I could make out two lumps under the covers. They were in bed. But of course they were in bed. Where else would they be? I padded down the stairs, guided and safeguarded by the little nightlight. I flicked on the light in the kitchen and then instantly turned it back off again. The curtains were open, and somehow I felt open, exposed to anybody outside who was watching. This was stupid. Nobody was outside. Nobody was watching. I turned the light back on, opened the fridge, and grabbed the carton of milk. I took a big chug from the carton. My mother hated when I did that. She was asleep, so what was she going to do or say? Or know or do? I took another gulp. I walked over the back door. I jiggled the door handle just to make sure it was locked. Of course it was locked. Berta always made sure this place was sealed up as tight as a drum every night. She was almost paranoid about things like that, so there was no need to check. Just like there was no need to check the front door or the door that led out to the garage into the house. I took another drink from the carton, tipping it back and draining the last bit of milk. I put the empty carton down on the kitchen counter. Then I went to check the front and the garage doors.